Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay. All right. Roll call, please.
Board Member Smith,
Here.
Board Member Bynum,
Here.
Board Member Daly, Board Member Riston,
Here.
Chairperson Connolly.
Here. I wonder if Daly's on his way.
He just emailed me saying that he can't get into the Zoom meeting, so I'm going to email him back the login information.
Okay, we'll just wait just a moment, right? We can wait just a minute.
Sure.
It's good to have a young person.
Is it in the, okay. What, I wonder, I just need to edit it, so.
Somebody would not. There you go. All right, first on our agenda is the consent calendar. Was there any public comment on the consent calendar?
Mr. Chairperson, I did not receive any written communication for any agenda items today, and I do not see any public members wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, would anyone on the board like to pull something from the consent agenda? I see no interest, so entertain a motion to approve it.
So moved.
A second.
And no discussion, give everybody a chance. All right, call the roll. Supposed to do that when I'm using the,
Board Member Smith?
Present.
no, it's just
Yea or nay?
aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
Board Member Bynum?
Yes.
Board Member Daly?
Aye.
Board Member Riston? Chairperson Connolly.
Aye. Oh, that was good. We're going to get a report now, update on a GSA financial audit. Doesn't
Hi,
say.
yes. Thank you, Chair Conley. This is Kelly Peterson, the Butte County Water and Resource Conservation Department, part of your management committee here, and I just wanted to bring this to your attention. We are, as a GSA, subject to Government Code 6505, which requires either an annual audit or an audit every 2 years. If we do opt to go for a 2-year audit, which is what we're going to likely suggest, that's going to require a unanimous vote by the board, and it was suggested by our council that that should be done through a resolution. So just wanted to give you guys a quick update that we will most likely be bringing that to you next month in the form of a resolution to approve a audit for every 2 years for this GSA. And that's all I have.
Any questions or comments by any board member? And I assume there's no change in the status, no public comment.
Mr. Chairperson, there is not any public comment on this item.
So we'll just take that as, I have a suggestion. When somebody's going to give a report, if we know who it is, put them in the agenda ahead of time, please. It's just a little cleaner, like whoever's going to do number 4, number 5, number 6, or number 7, it's cool to have their name on there. Just a suggestion. Number 5, Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee update. There was a written report. We all had access to it. Is there any questions or comments on that report?
Nope.
No interest at home? Okay. Number 6, the Wyandotte Creek GSA financial report as of March 16th, 2021. We also read that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Oh, this is a good meeting. Last, number 7, management committee update. Is that Kelly again, or is that you, Paul?
That would be Kelly, but I was going to point out that you jumped over regular business 2 and 3.
Oh, I didn't even see him. Update on the development of groundwater sustainability plan for Wyandotte Creek subdivision. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was trying to get us out of here on a new record.
I know. You thought it was a good meeting, great meeting so far, and you kind of jumped too far ahead.
I'm sorry. You
no
can
problem.
fire me next time. Yeah, that's good.
We'll still make it a very efficient meeting. Jack, could I have share rights? There we go. So can you all see my screen?
We can't hear.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to briefly touch upon the status of the groundwater sustainability plan for Wyandotte Creek and give you sort of a timeline and kind of what to expect, because things are going to, between now and June and July, really start ramping up with a lot of the elements coming forward. So again, I keep throwing up the sections that we have to comply with. The administrative sections, we are largely working on those sections as staff and have them pretty much drafted up. The notice and communication plan is something that through technical support services, through DWR, the facilitator is assisting to write that section up, describing how we're providing notice and communication to stakeholders, which is a required element. The basin setting has been drafted, and I'll speak a little bit about that. That's in final draft form. And we're in the midst of sustainable management criteria development, and largely some of the monitoring network sections were done as part of the basin setting project, except the representative monitoring section will be part of the sustainable management criteria, as well as assessment improvement that will still be worked upon towards the end, and then project and management actions. So as I said, the basin setting chapter is in final draft. It went out for a 30-day comment period last year. So it's sitting in final draft form like all the other chapters. It won't become final until the entire GSP is adopted by the board. As a component of groundwater dependent ecosystems, I'll turn over to Kelly on an update on that component.
Yes, thank you, Paul. The GDEs, which stands for Groundwater Dependent Ecosystems, that's basically looking at a big data set provided by TNC of all potential groundwater dependent ecosystems in the area. So we went through with the managers of the GSAs to look at each one of those, in particular, well, a subset of them, and really get a handle on, whether or not we did feel like they were connected to groundwater or not. So then we recently, in fact, just earlier this week, we put some of the final revisions onto that data set after looking at some of the proximity of these areas to irrigated agriculture, and specifically, rice or anything else that's irrigated. The idea being that some of these areas can really access some of the surface water that's supplied to the ag laterally underground versus, feeding off of groundwater dependence only. So a lot of those revisions were actually done this week and reclassified. Some draft maps are being put together, and those were shipped off to our consultant team, Geosyntech, just a couple of days ago. So they now have it to work on as we set the sustainable management criteria for these areas as well, to consider those. That's all I have.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm getting an echo. Do you hear an echo? That's good. Okay. So the Sustainable Management Criteria and Representative Monitoring Network chapters are being drafted right now. And again, the Sustainable Management Criteria is going to include a couple elements. One is setting the minimum threshold, and those are minimum threshold is where if the basin got to where you set the minimum threshold, that's where you're going to determine that it's significant and unreasonable. And that's a place where you don't want the basin to get to, but it indicates if you get there, you're really having problems. And we're setting that at the level where the most shallow domestic well is. And then if it gets there and we have it pretty much widespread in a couple areas in the basin, and we need to determine that over a period of time, a couple of years, then it indicates that this is not just a short aberration. This is something that's undesirable, and we've kind of hit failure. So we do need to determine that, and it's going to be based upon the most sensitive indicator out there is the shallow domestic well. They're really the canary in the coal mines, and we want to assure protection of domestic wells, which will then afford protection for other groundwater users, ag, municipal wells, and the like for groundwater elevation. And then we really want to focus in on where we want to set the basin to operate, the measurable objective. And this is where we want the basin to be in 2042. But given the status of the basin, we can hopefully get to leveling the basin off sooner than that, but really the deadline is 2042. And what was looked at was looking at the trend of 2030 going down, and it's slightly below where 2015 lowest level was, but it gives sort of a phase-in approach to level the basin off, and it would be reasonably above your minimum threshold. You'll have a sufficient operational buffer for where you operate the basin to where you would really start to run into problems. So that will be also included in the sustainable management criteria. And each one of those, the measurable minimum threshold and the measurable objective, will be set for each location around the representative monitoring location. And these are wells that were located around the basin with a 3-mile radius to really bring some localized perspective in on the hydrographs and where groundwater levels are at. So all of that will be laid out in the document, as well as the methodology for stream depletion. And this is something that will tie right into what Kelly just described is protection of groundwater dependent ecosystems. The stream depletion indicator is something that we are going to list in the plan as being a data gap. We do need to increase the monitoring network and establish one shallow monitoring network along creeks and streams to be able to monitor if we are having stream depletion. And that's okay in the plan. We do have 20 years to implement. It was pretty well recognized that managing interconnected streams is something that's new. Groundwater managers really haven't done, but we've recognized how important it is. And so it'll be probably one of the top priorities for us to take on during implementation. And then the last piece is water quality, looking at saline intrusion. And there'll be a monitoring network set up to monitor for that. It will expand upon the current efforts that the county's been taking to monitor for saline intrusion. So it will really be an improvement to that program. So we're planning on getting the draft document out that'll really describe the methodology and the intent and some of the details on this in April for a 30-day comment period. And what's been new since the basin setting chapter was we do have the Water Advisory Committee. They will be reviewing the comments and discussing response to comments in May. And then we're going to bring the review of the Water Advisory Committee and the draft to the board in June, maybe July, with recommendations for you to consider approving it as a final draft. It won't be final approval because as we complete these different pieces, we're going to then compile it, the entire GSP later in the summer, which may need some tweaking once we get all the puzzle pieces together to make the entire plan operate well. So then the other major section is projects and management actions. And this really ties in to the means of getting to where we want the basin to operate, where we want sustainability to be. So we can want to set the basin at levels we want, but we need the means to get there. And that's either going to be through projects that will either reduce demand or increase recharge, or both, or management actions that the board could take to help advance the goals of the groundwater sustainability plan. So right now we're in the process of soliciting projects and management actions. There may be project partners. Some may be the member agencies, whether it's Butte County, City of Oroville, or Thermalito, or members of the Water Advisory Committee, South Feather Water and Power. Could also be involved in this, or Cal Water, as well as others. And so we want to really cast a wide net to identify some real meaningful projects. So we're going to start compile those. As they come in, we'll have discussions with the Water Advisory Committee. We'll give you a status report in May. And then we'll hold a board public workshop meeting in June on the entire draft of the groundwater sustainability on projects and management actions with a 30-day comment period. And then in July, the Water Advisory Committee will review the comments and provide recommendations to the board for you to consider recommendations and approval of final draft in July, but most likely August, to keep bring that piece together. A couple things that we do want to note on projects and management actions. They will cost money. They're not going to be covered by the grant. And actually the grant, we're really kind of squeaking through with the monies we have to complete the plan. But these are all going to need to be funded from outside sources, either by project sponsors or by fees. And that would be something I'm going to speak to next, or by grants. There'll be grant opportunities also, but I want to remind that there is going to be a cost-benefit relationship with the projects or actions because they're going to need to be paid for. The other chapter we really haven't spoken much about, and it's probably one of the more important ones that has to be in, is the implementation chapter, and this is will include how you're going to carry out this plan. So we submit the plan. We have some grandiose ideas and strategies on how to get there. And the state wants to know, really, how do you plan on getting there? Is this just wishful thinking, or do you have a concrete roadmap to get there? And it'll include everything on describing the projects that we have in, data gaps, and there will be some data gaps. There'll be some data improvement areas. That won't be data gaps, but we've had a lot of discussion on areas where we'd like to improve the data. And then management actions, agency actions the agency may take over time besides the administrative processes we have. And so in that, it'll be a description of how we're going to carry out each of those aspects, either through fees or grants or some other means. So we'll start those discussions with the Water Advisory Committee in May. In June, we'll have a 30-day comment period implementation. We'll be having a discussion with the board in May and June also. Again, similar process, Water Advisory Committee review public comments and recommendation to the board, and then you'll consider approval of the final draft in July and August. And again, with the implementation with any of these, with grants or fees or whatever, it doesn't have to be implemented immediately upon implementation, submission of the plan. This is a 20-year plan, so it might, some of these things may be slated to be implemented 10 years out, and we can phase in the implementation of this plan over the 20-year time frame. One last piece I didn't include a slide on is interbasin coordination, which is something we've been spending some time on through the facilitator who's been facilitating interbasin coordination discussions among 13 groundwater sustainability agencies in the region. We have 3, and then the other subbasins in the region are included in the discussions. Initially, the approach was to take a technical look and try to compare all the technical aspects that the different GSAs have put together in the basin setting plan, their document. And that seemed like a logical approach. It turned out to be not really feasible, got to be a lot more technical. And then we realized that a lot of people are at different points in their development. Some haven't even drafted their basin setting yet. So it was really difficult to complete that work. And there were many other aspects to interbasin coordination we needed to talk about, and these meetings never got too far. They were just with staff and consultants, and then there was concern about what was going on. And so we've been having all the GSAs have been having discussions with the facilitator, and they're seeking our input on how to best move this process forward. So we're going to start having more public discussions on what the pillars of interbasin coordination should be. And so from a county perspective, as a member agency, we're going to be having a discussion with our Water Advisory Committee and the board on aspects that we think should be brought forward. And it probably will include things like an analysis of connecting adjoining subbasins on what their plan is and how that would affect an adjoining subbasin. And that would be an analysis of the submitted plans, and that could be scoped out. There was also discussions on coordinating projects. So, among adjoining subbasins. So let's say us, Wyandotte Creek, and Yuba County GSA could coordinate monitoring along Huncutt Creek if that was a stream depletion issue or something along those lines, as well as keeping updated on each other's plan development over time, because after we submit the plans are inevitably going to change as conditions change, as new data comes in, and there may be changes to undesirable results or how management decisions are going to be framed out. So I think it's important that the agencies, if you're joining, have boundaries, that there's a process to continue coordinating and having a dialogue so we keep each other updated as to what's going on. And there's been a long history of coordination among the 6 counties in this region. And so that's something that we want to build on. But the first step is we want to start talking about what components of interbasin coordination over the span of the entire GSP implementation would be important, and then look at the means on how we would craft that into the plan. So more to come on that, and this will be a real important element. I will say that this is a requirement. We need to describe how we're coordinating with our adjoining subbasins. Most GSAs really haven't done too much with this, and there really isn't a guidebook from DWR on how to do this. So we're staking out some new ground here, mostly because we recognize the importance of this and the interconnectedness of the water throughout this entire region. So as we complete all these different chapters, we're targeting September to have the entire plan compiled, and we're going to subject that to a 60-day public comment period, and that would include land use agencies, the city of Oroville, Butte County on notice, and then 60 days out, the Water Advisory Committee will review comments and provide recommendations to the board, and then we'll be looking to have board hearings in December for approval. We will have time, if needed, to go into January if there are other adjustments the board wants to the plan. But then January, we really want to spend the time getting the plan submitted into the portal, which is a technical hoop and hurdle that DWR set up, but so we get in it early enough before the January 31st deadline. And then I also put this in is that once we submit the plan, DWR has monies set aside for groundwater sustainability plan implementation. So once we submit the plan, we become eligible to submit a grant to implement the plan. And this would cover, again, some of those projects or actions or other data improvement aspects we may identify in the plan, because any project listed in the plan is eligible for funding. And so the idea is as we get the plan developed in the winter, really want to hit the ground running to submit that grant application in January at the same time we submit it, because we're going to be eligible for anywhere from a minimum of $2 million to $5 million through this grant opportunity. And that will really give us a boost to hit the ground running on implementation of the plan. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or thoughts. Thank you.
Questions or comments by anybody here? Are you good, Kyle? He's got his hand
sorry,
up.
I was trying to figure this out. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We've talked pretty extensively about where the minimum thresholds will be set. Where are we at in terms of deciding about the measurable objective level? Have we talked about that and I just missed it? What's the idea there?
Yeah,
Thank you.
so in the draft document that'll go out, it'll be based upon the 2030 trend line. So it'll show a slight decline, which will give us some buffer that if we don't have enough project and management actions, we'll be able to ease into that without creating sort of a backing us into a non-compliance piece. It will, even though we do that, we could, if we have enough projects or management actions to bring the basin up, to adjust that to a higher, more favorable level. So initially coming in as a more reasonable level from the start, because we don't know what projects and management actions are. That might be one of the adjustments as we see what we have on the table for projects and management actions. We would maybe make some adjustments. So right now, that would be an iterative process as we go through projects and management actions. But that's the initial proposal that'll come out in the draft.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So could one of the projects be the transfer, say we have some decline, transfer surface water to take people off of wells or to passively recharge?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's key components. A lot of GSAs have done that. The in lieu recharge, Palermo project that's being scoped out, potentially bringing surface water from South Feather down to people who are on domestic wells, would be taking off a groundwater source, reducing the demand, and replacing that with a surface water. That could be done, as well as taking available surface water, whether it's natural creeks and streams or other waters, and creating recharge basins DWR has a program called FloodMar, Flood Manage Active Recharge, that they've been working with the state board to work out simplifying the water right process for that, knowing that this is real important for GSPs and sustainability. So all that will be opportunities to improve basin conditions and reach sustainability.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Paul, I don't know if this is the proper place. This is Bruce. Earlier in one of the first meetings I attended, there was some interest in additional monitoring well, or are we still in a position to have an additional monitoring well, or where do we stand with that?
Kelly, you want to take that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I was actually going to cover that in my report, but I'll do it right now. Yeah, what you're talking about, Bruce, is the TSS program through DWR. It's the Technical Services Support Program, and we were approved for funding for installation of the first new multi-completion monitoring well in Wyandotte Creek subbasin. And so what that means basically is it's one hole in the ground, and then there's 5 individual casings within that that all are separated, so that we can actually look at groundwater levels and groundwater conditions, whether or not it's for saline intrusion or just depth or pH, at 5 distinct depths underground. And so that's actually moving forward. We've got all the agreements in place as of today. The last remaining pieces are really to get a permit through environmental health. And right now, I just contacted Debbie over at DWR, and as of today, they're going to be working on coordinating drill start dates with the landowner next week, and starting to get that scheduled. And they're really just waiting on the driller at this point to figure out what their schedule is like. So that is moving forward. But in addition, I think you might be also talking about adding more monitoring wells to our grid. And that's something that, if people are interested in allowing that access, they should just go ahead and contact me directly, and we can move forward in that direction as well, too.
Okay. Well, I think, Kyle, I hate to put you on the spot, but I think at one point you had mentioned that you would perhaps be interested in providing a spot for a monitoring well.
Yeah, absolutely. We had some brief discussions about that, and I think we're still open to it. I'm not quite sure what if there could be an issue with proximity to any of the other monitoring wells. I'm sure it can't be too close, so we have to figure out that part of it. But there's several options that we can provide to provide a spot for it.
Okay, so it sounds like perhaps, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps you and Kyle should have a conversation?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Kyle's father, Dave, and Kyle and I have discussed this over the last year and a half or so. I think there were some things on their end to try to get figured out in terms of the best placement, but I think as soon as this one that's in place and currently moving forward, once we get that wrapped up, I think it's a good time to circle back around and, let's draw some circles on a map and get a well dug.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. That answers my questions.
So a follow-up, is there another geographic area we ought to look at, or because, we can't have too many. It seems like we don't have enough. Where else should we look and try to get interest in one? Because I know a lot of people in the district.
Yeah, as part of Geosyntek's look at the sustainable management criteria, and I think it was also covered in basin setting, there were some identified gaps for the monitoring network. Like I said, the shallow monitoring network along creeks and stream was identified as a data gap, and those will be identified in the draft chapter, as well as represented monitoring well gaps. So I believe that's going to be a discussion item for the Water Advisory Committee meeting on April 1st, is at least an initial discussion on data gaps, which will include monitoring wells as a data gap and locations where they may be. So that might be a means of identifying, okay, where are the needs, and then we can identify hopefully willing landowners that will line that up.
Okay, thank you.
And just a quick point to add to that too, if I may. If you recall the presentation I gave where we kind of went through all the details of the monitoring wells we do have in the subbasin, only 1 out of the 10, I believe, was a well over 600 feet deep. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it in that sense, we have a great need almost everywhere for deep monitoring data. So it doesn't really exclude any areas, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments by board members?
Only one comment, Kyle, you're doing a fine job as a daddy.
Yeah.
I got, it's just change of plans today, so it happened last minute, but we're making the best of it. I do have a quick question for Paul real quick again. As far as these potential projects for groundwater or for surface water storage for recharge, has there been any, exploration into like, is this actually feasible with red tape and any type? I know there's an issue with like no net loss of wetlands and stream bank alterations and things like that can really put a lot of roadblocks in for some of these really great projects. Because of this new legislation, is there possibility to kind of wade through some of that now and actually get some of these ideas, implemented?
A great question.
Yeah, so there are opportunities. We did a report in 2018 on recharge opportunities, the range in lieu, field flooding, ponding, and that sort throughout the county, including Wyandotte Creek is sort of a starting point. So one of the thoughts is if recharge is really of interest, and there was a lot of good discussion, I think, at the last meeting on real good opportunities, that's something we can then bring in the DWR Floodmar people and start looking at the logistics of what it would take to do that and start framing that out. And that would be a great grant opportunity to start developing that and looking at that. They've started some work on a pilot basis over in Colusa County. We've been tracking that process. So we can definitely start looking at that.
Any more questions by anyone? All right, thank you. And I know no public comment. All right, so we're on number 3, which is Land IQ prepared crop report of land uses. Our lights went out.
They're censored.
Oh, well. We're too still. We're like Hollywood now, right?
Everyone's being too still.
Okay, the prepared crop report.
So we included this report, the Agricultural Groundwater Users of Butte County, which is a association of ag groundwater pumpers, mostly in the Vina Subbasin, contracted with Land IQ to evaluate specifically land use changes over the last 20 years. They included a lot of other really good information on crop demand and changes in demand for different crops over time, and really highlighted some of the improvements to water use efficiency that's really gone on in this county with new plantings. But it really, I think, is information showing that there really hasn't been a huge increase in ag lands. There's been a slight decline, but generally a overall decline in water demand, groundwater demand for ag throughout the county. And that's largely due to the loss of acreage and then also irrigation efficiency. So one is we're moving forward. There's concern, interest about, because they see other parts of the state, or they may see a lot of times if new orchard's going in along a highway, I think just human nature, you're thinking that a 40-acre block going in is just huge, expansive acreage going in. And if you look at some of the information, it's kind of not. If you look at 100,000 acres of land going in, so the report was real thorough. Really complemented the work and analysis that was in the basin setting report that looked at trends over 20 years and projected trends. So it provided a lot of additional information, and I thought it was worth passing along. The county hosted a brown bag seminar on perspectives on land use changes, and Joel Kimmelshoe was the one who presented this from Land IQ, as well as Christina and Amy Raymond from Water Commission, who had a different analysis, presenting out the changes in ag land use and other land use in the county and the subbasins over the last 20 years or so. So we felt it was real important to, when detailed factual information is out, that it gets out there so people are not driven by either what perceptions they have or other things, because we do need to build these plans on the back of sound science. So I didn't plan on a presentation on this. I just presented it for information. So if anybody has any questions, I'll entertain them, or if you haven't had a chance to look at the program or see the analysis and get a chance later and want to follow up and ask questions, feel free to do so at any time.
Well, I was surprised that so many people, I just made the assumption that many people were still flood irrigating orchards, and from the report you can see that's not true. I guess because it's much more efficient to use a trickle irrigation. So that was surprising. Anybody else any questions or comments on this report? No, we'll move on to number 7, back in order here. Management Committee update.
Hi, yes, this is Kelly Peterson again, and I'll just give you a quick few reminders. We talked about the the TSF well and that moving forward. Also, just wanted to highlight real quickly, last week I was out in the field and I was able to measure all of our monitoring wells in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin. And we haven't done the thorough analysis on it yet and done all the graphing, but in general, it's looking like where we were at about 2014. So 2013, 2014 levels for spring. So if you recall, the most recent drought that we were in was 2012 to 2016. And a couple years into that is basically where levels are looking at right now. Which makes sense because last year was considered a dry year, and this year we're looking at potentially a drought year, critical and or dry year. So, those that data will be coming out within the next month or so for your review as well. And yeah, it looks like the Feather River watershed at least is slated for its second driest year on record in terms of rainfall and precipitation. I think Lake Oroville at the moment is close to about 40% of capacity and 53% of historical average for the date. So we're definitely in dry conditions right now. So just keeping that in mind. And real quick, just some housekeeping as a reminder. Autumn Thomas from our office sent out an email to all of you on March 11th about the Form 700. The Form 700s that are due by April 1st. And that's for all the board members, all alternate board members, all of the management committee, and also council. So if you have, filled one of those Form 700s out for another agency, that's fine as long as the Wyandotte Creek GSA is listed and all the disclosures are filled out. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me or reply to her directly. April 1st is the deadline for that. And I will now pass it over to Chris, who's going to give you a quick update on some other training reminders.
Hi, Chris Heindel here, Management Committee member from Thermal Water and Sewer District. I just wanted to point out we still have 2 board members, Mr. Bynum and Mr. Wilburn, that need to complete the AB 1234 Brown Act compliant training. So I'll be getting a hold of the two of you to get that completed before the end of the fiscal year. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Probably
Mr.
not.
Chairperson, I have not received any public comment.
Any board member like to bring something up not on the agenda? You're more than welcome. All right, then we're going to adjourn. We'll see you back here April 22nd at 2 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.